So this video is really meant to be an informative video for those who may be new to SN95 Mustangs and Fox Mustangs that have SN95 rear disc brakes. One question that frequently gets asked is, what is the difference between Cobra and GT-V6 rear calipers? And really the answer is it's quite simple. The calipers are the same, but the caliper bracket is what differs here. So what we have here is a Cobra caliper on the left and a GT caliper on the right. Now, the calipers themselves, which is this particular portion here on top, which contains the piston, is exactly the same between all 94 through 04 Cobras, GTs, V6, Mach, etc. They're all 38 millimeter calipers, as you can see here. They feature a 38 stamp indicating the piston size is 38 millimeters. Really, the difference is this front bracket here. Now this shot here illustrates the difference in the actual pad support brackets that I'm talking about. But your Cobra bracket here is bridged in the front with this connecting piece here. Meanwhile, your GT-V6 bracket does not have a connection in the front here. Now that's a good way to identify them, but there's one major difference between the two of them, which is why you can use one bracket on the Cobra and one bracket only with the GT rotor. Now that main difference between the Cobra and GT brackets is the slot in which the actual rotor passes. On the Cobra bracket, which is on the left, that slot is about 1 inch wide there. But on the GT V6, it's only about 3/4 of an inch wide. That's because the actual rotor on the Cobra is slightly thicker and vented, while the rotor on the GT is solid and not vented. Now here's a Cobra rotor with your Cobra specific pad bracket. And you can see how you have plenty of room for the Cobra rotor to pass. Now here's the Cobra rotor with the GT bracket on. And while you can see it does fit, it's very tight. There's barely any movement. Now you got to remember, on C-clip axles, it is normal for the axle to come in and out a little bit. So it's possible that as you drive along, even though it may clear while you're sitting still, you're going to be rubbing this as the rotor goes in and out slightly. So you definitely want to use the Cobra bracket, which has a lot more space than the actual GT one. So what that really means is that folks that may be interested in doing a Cobra brake conversion to their GT don't need to buy an entire caliper. You don't need to go out and get Cobra specific calipers. You just need to source those individual brackets. The body of the caliper, this part here and here, is exactly the same. Really what you're doing is you're taking your brackets here and swapping them out to accept the different pads and the rotor thickness. Now there is a difference in the pads. Now if you were to measure the pads, on the Cobra you'd find the pad is about 15 millimeters thick, but on the GT V6 it's actually 17 millimeter. Now aftermarkets tend to make the thinner pad, the 15 millimeter thickness, because then you can make one pad and it applies to all the models, versus making the thicker 17 millimeter pad and only applying to a limited amount of vehicles. So if you buy aftermarket pads, chances are they are the 15 millimeter size, even if you get them for a GT. So you might be able to reuse your pads there, but you better safe than sorry, so I would definitely check. You can even go further than this, since the calipers are interchangeable, and do something like the Taurus 43 millimeter here, which will fit onto either the GT or Cobra pad support bracket here. This one here is actually on a Cobra bracket. But that's another video that I have regarding the Taurus 43 millimeter caliper. Just to emphasize, that is not an upgrade for stock SN95 brakes. So if you're just running standard SN95 brakes, don't go throwing Taurus 43 millimeter calipers on there. That's really more of an option if you have a big brake kit up front. So this is your standard 94 through 04 GT V6 rear brake. And the quick way to identify this brake setup is to look for the caliper, the bridge on the caliper bracket that connects these two halves. Another thing to notice is that these rotors are 10.5 inches in diameter. And if your dust shield is equipped, you'll notice you can see it easily around the edge of the rotor here. It protrudes about 1 inch or so. And then finally, you can tell these rotors are flat, horizontal here. So that's a quick way to identify the GT V6 rear brakes. And here is your Cobra brake setup, 94 to 2004 Cobra. This brake setup also came on 2001 Bullits and 2003 to 2004 Mach 1s. Now the 99 to 04 Cobra would be an IRS rear end, but the brake setup will be the same. It'll be the same rotor and caliper. But quick way to determine if you have Cobra brakes on your car is that if you notice the dust shield here, you can barely see it across the rotor. The rotor and the dust shield are almost the same diameter. These are 11.65 inch diameter rotors. You'll also notice that the rotor hatch here, this flange here, is at an angle. It's not as straight in like the GT was. It's actually beveled at an angle. And then the obvious thing is that you have your bridge on your caliper bracket. It's important to note that in order to put Cobra brakes on a GT, you're going to need some additional parts beyond this one bracket. I have another video coming that will detail out the additional parts required to put Cobra brakes on a GT or V6 Mustang. But in closing, if you really want to simplify it, the only difference between Cobra and GT rear calipers is this bracket here which supports your pads. But I really recommend running the bracket for the brake setup you have. So if you have Cobra brakes, obviously you need to run the Cobra bracket. If you have GT V6 brakes, don't put Cobra brackets on there. Stick with this bracket until you actually upgrade. But really, you can get these from Cardone for about 20 bucks a bracket. So if you have a GT and you're putting Cobra brakes on your car and you need to upgrade the calipers to Cobra spec, you just want to buy this bracket here, which is the unpainted part. You want to get it for a Cobra. So hopefully that informs you on the differences. Thanks for watching.